When Nelson Mandela's African National Congress, or ANC, took power in this country in 1994, many people, in fact most people from all over the political spectrum, predicted that it wouldn't be sustainable in the long term and that it would collapse rather quickly. In fact, evidence we uncovered here at the Willem Petsche Group suggests that even as the National Party was handing over power to the ANC, their leadership itself secretly expected to regain control of the government within a few short years after the ANC failed. But of course, this hasn't happened. At least not completely. You see, some parts of this country can still be considered first world, and a small minority is still, 3 decades later, carrying the entire economy of the semi-failed state on its own backs. But today we are going to highlight how the errors in the predictions made by the leaders of the 90s actually have nothing to do with the ANC, and that in spite of all the ANC's destruction on this country and the collapse of the majority of our infrastructure, the fact that South Africa still stands today can be attributed to the impact of socio-political and socio-technological advances brought about by the small minority of the private sector in South Africa and also abroad. You see, in the late 80s or early 90s, it became increasingly evident that the ANC would inevitably take political power in this country. In a 1987 speech by F.W. de Klerk, who was then not yet the President of South Africa but the Minister of National Education and Planning, as well as the Leader of the House of Assembly, stated the following, and I quote, "Every effort to turn the tide of black workers streaming into the urban areas failed. It does not help to bluff ourselves about this. The economy demands the permanent presence of the majority of blacks in urban areas. They cannot stay in South Africa year after year without political representation." You see, de Klerk consequently began the process of dismantling the little that remained of apartheid in 1987, shortly after becoming state president in 1989. He eventually abolished the last apartheid laws and released Nelson Mandela from prison in 1990. The final nail in the coffin for apartheid would of course be in 1992 in the referendum, which de Klerk called out the response to pressure from conservatives claiming that he didn't have the mandate to hand the country over to the ANC. In that referendum, held on St. Patrick's Day that year, the last time a whites-only ballot took place in South Africa, 69% of South Africans voted in favor of the new constitution to inaugurate a liberal, multicultural democracy, which would inevitably also lead to the ANC achieving their victory in 1994 and remaining in parliament or in government in South Africa ever since for the past 3 decades. But while we know that the right-wing leaders of the time, such as Jaap Maree from the HNP and Andries Treurnig from the Conservative Party, openly predicted that the country would collapse under the ANC's governance, a 1999 interview with General Constant Viljoen revealed that even the National Party leadership themselves, as they were actively working to hand over power to Nelson Mandela and the ANC, also expected the government would collapse within its first few years. In the interview conducted with the Irish-born American scholar Padraig O'Malley, Viljoen made the following shocking revelation, and I quote, "The whole idea of de Klerk was to regain power as soon as possible, and his first try was to do it already in 1994, and the result is well known. Then he felt it would be possible by changing the name from the National Party to the New National Party, and he thought it would be possible within 5 months to see the ANC government collapsing through inefficiency, its corruption, and so on and so on. And with a lot of blacks swinging towards the New National Party so that they could take over the government then. Now, naturally, this has not happened, so as I was right in my estimation of them, I said that they are naive in what they expected. They can never do so. Yet, as we know very well today, 27 years after Viljoen made this explosive revelation and 32 years after the ANC came into power, this didn't happen. Why? Is it because the politicians who had predicted the decline or the absolute destruction of South Africa under the ANC was wrong about the ANC? Not really. It is not that they didn't foresee what the ANC would do to South Africa. It is that they didn't foresee other international and technological developments which changed the playing field in South Africa altogether. Ultimately, the failure predicted by these leaders has been repeatedly postponed by two major developments they clearly didn't fully account for in the early 90s. Number one, the ability of the government to borrow trillions of rands in finance, financing its own failures. And number two, the second, the extraordinary ability of private businesses, families and communities to step in whatever the government abandons and whenever it abandons one of its most basic responsibilities, and how this process would be internationalized through digitalization. The first and perhaps most important of these pillars is debt. In 1994, the incoming ANC inherited a country whose national debt was still very much manageable and one of the lowest in Africa. But today, the national government's gross loan debt has increased to more than 6 trillion rands, or almost half $1 trillion, which amounts to over 3/4 of our entire GDP. This means that the government is not even financing much of its own expenditure with taxpayers' money or taxes collected from this country's citizens and its businesses. It is just borrowing hundreds of billions of rands every single year against the future earnings of our children and our grandchildren. International institutions are now doing their best to keep this system afloat. Since 2022, the World Bank alone has approved a series of major loans to South Africa, including a $750 million loan for the government's COVID recovery, a $1 billion loan for the energy transition, and further loans of $1.5 billion each in 2025 and 2026 to support infrastructure development or actually just repairs. Additional financing has come from the African Development Bank and foreign governments, while international investors continue purchasing South African government debt. Now, I'm not claiming that foreign lenders are deliberately financing corruption in South Africa. Many of the conditions for these loans are tied to reforms that South Africa desperately needs. But they nevertheless allow the government to continue spending far, far more than it will ever be able to collect, thereby postponing the point at which its financial model would otherwise become impossible to maintain, as it should have been almost 2 decades ago. But the piling debt of South Africa alone cannot explain why ordinary South Africans are still able to work and communicate and travel and trade and successfully raise their families in this country, and the corruption and incompetence that was created by the ANC. For that, we have to look at the second pillar holding this country together: the private sector's gradual replacement of the state in every facet where the state needed to provide a service. Nowhere was this more evident than during the electricity crisis. For years, our Eskom failed to build or maintain sufficient generating capacity, plunging the country into increasingly severe load shedding by the day. But households and businesses did not simply wait in the darkness for the government to rescue them. They knew this would never happen. They installed solar panels and batteries and inverters and private generators on an enormous scale. Mining companies, factories, farms and independent power producers invested billions in their own generation capacity. A recent report by the World Bank revealed that the private sector investment in renewable energy in South Africa had increased 6-fold over the past 5 years, which is what is responsible for ending all load shedding in South Africa. Well, as Julius Malema would say, at least for now. The same process is taking place in security. South Africa now has more than 600,000 active private security officers. This number is more than 3 times the number of personnel employed by the South African Police Service. Private companies and even civic rights groups now patrol neighborhoods and track stolen vehicles, guard businesses, monitor cameras, and respond to emergencies. Community organizations erect cameras and number plate recognition systems, while neighborhood groups use digital communication to warn residents of crimes happening in real time. And then there is the technological revolution that virtually nobody in the early 90s could have ever accurately foreseen. When the ANC took power, fewer than 1 in every 100 South Africans had access to the internet. There were no smartphones, no WhatsApp groups, no online banking, no affordable satellite connections, or nationwide digital marketplaces. Businesses and citizens were still heavily reliant upon physical infrastructure from the government for their communication and their administration. Today, a person can transfer money, submit documents, consult a doctor, receive education, operate a business, and even communicate across the entire world without ever entering any government facility. Email and instant messaging have replaced much of the post office's traditional function, while private courier companies and digital tracking systems delivering parcels across the country despite the collapse of the South African Post Office. Online retail alone is now already worth more than 130 billion rands in South Africa, or almost 2% of our entire GDP. And this operates completely independent of any state postage network. Private hospitals and medical schemes similarly carry millions of patients whom the public health system would otherwise have to accommodate. Independent schools, homeschooling networks, and online educational services relieve pressure on failing government schools. Businesses repair potholes, maintain the area surrounding their premises, and finance their own private water, transport, and telecommunications infrastructure. In many municipalities across South Africa, ratepayers associations and civil organizations have begun performing work that residents have already paid the government to perform. And despite black economic empowerment, the digitalization of the global economy has increasingly allowed skilled white South Africans to bypass the domestic labor market restrictions on their race altogether by just working remotely for foreign companies and earning dollars on their computer in their house while continuing to live in South Africa. According to the latest data, at least 100,000 white South Africans are now working for overseas companies from their home over the internet. This is the great paradox of modern-day South Africa. The country continues functioning not because of anything the ANC has done, or even because the predictions about the ANC were even off, but quite frankly because society has become increasingly skilled at surviving without the government, without the state. Of course, this parallel private system of the state comes at an enormous economic cost. South Africans are effectively forced to pay twice for the very same services, once through taxes for policing electricity, education, healthcare and infrastructure that the government promises to provide, and then again from their remaining income after tax for private alternatives that actually work. Poorer citizens, on the other hand, who cannot afford this second payment, remain trapped in this deteriorating public system and therefore suffer the most from the government's failure. While those who can afford to continue to flourish on these islands of excellence, these little first world enclaves within this massive third world country. We here at the Willem Petsche Group are dedicated to finding the whole truth without sugarcoating the matter. We're willing to show that the predictions of the right in the early 90s fails to count for everything, while at the same time not giving any credit to the ANC where it most definitely isn't due. You can support our quest to create a media company that actually talks in your interest by becoming a patron of the Willem Petsche Group today. Simply follow these easy steps on the banner to do so. We would greatly appreciate every drop in the bucket to fund our research and produce videos such as these every single day. You see, ultimately, even if after 32 years the current system hasn't completely collapsed yet, the ANC government's power is clearly being dismantled both locally and internationally as we speak. And the developments of the last 2 years especially seem to strongly suggest that the ANC's end, already foreseen by the Afrikaner leaders in the early 90s, is now indeed finally in sight. If you want to understand the full extent to which the ANC has not only severely damaged this country's economy, but even the global economy itself, you can check out our research report where we reveal all of this shocking data by simply clicking on this link appearing on your screen right here. We truly believe you will benefit massively from the knowledge we share in that research report. And thank you for watching today's video right up until the very end. We tremendously appreciate the gift of your time that you give us. Goodbye and God bless.